Today, I'm going to quit vaping before your very eyes. And as I do that, I'm going to talk about the situation with nicotine in prison and how the ban on nicotine in prison causes so many issues and how that relates to the war on drugs generally. So nicotine bans in prison started back around 2001. Before that, you could just buy cigarettes in prison at the commissary. The commissary is the little overpriced store where they sell inmates stuff so that nobody misses out on an opportunity to profit from even people who are incarcerated. But since then, nicotine has been outlawed in many prison facilities across the United States. However, according to the Lancet, smoking rates remain up to 63 times higher than they do in the free community. But I completely believe it because that was my experience in prison. Everybody who wants to smoke still smokes. Okay, I spent my time at Stewart Conservation Camp. It's a work camp where they mostly do wildland firefighting and stuff for incarcerated individuals. I was on a fire crew. I did wildland firefighting when I was in there. This is where my majority of my prison stay was. Okay, so if nicotine is banned and you can't buy it at the commissary store, then what are people smoking in there? Well, I'll tell you what they're smoking. Cigarettes, a lot of the time. Well, actually not a lot of the time, but sometimes cigarettes. A real, what we call a Taylor cigarette, which is like a, real factory cigarette, a Marlboro or Camel or something. Those came around sometimes, and those would cost, if you could get a hold of them, anywhere from $10 to $20, no joke, for one cigarette. Just one. And people would gladly pay it when it was available. The price would change depending on the availability with everything else, but that's what it is. And you might ask, how are people paying for this? How do they have money? People pay in commissary. They pay in stuff from the store. So whatever you bought something from the store for, say like a little 7-cent packaged soup that actually costs like closer to $1 in there, that would be, whatever the price of that item was. You would pay it to somebody else. That's the currency in prison, is your commissary. But more often than Taylor cigarettes, there would be tobacco, like Bolly Shag or Top or whatever, the tobacco that you roll. And that was also very expensive. That was much more common, but for just a little pinch of tobacco, it could cost around, $5 or $10. If you got a little bit bigger of a pinch, it would be more like $15, $20. And you could roll maybe a couple of what we call pinners out of that. A pinner is basically just barely any tobacco in some rolling paper, which the rolling paper that we used was mostly Bible paper. Anybody can message the chaplain and get a free Bible. So we get these Bibles, which the paper's super thin in it, and tear them up and make pinners out of Bible paper. And what a pinner is mostly Bible paper. You're mostly smoking the Bible paper, and there's a little bit of tobacco in there, and that would just, you could share that with 3 people just to get a little puff of tobacco. So people are paying really high prices for this little amount of rolling tobacco in a lot of cases. And the people they're getting it from are getting it brought in or bringing it in somehow. A pound of tobacco costs like $15 to $30 outside, and whoever's getting that is buying that on the outside and then getting it in, and the person that's getting it in will pay upwards of $500 for it. And then even though they're paying $500 for it, they're still making a huge profit selling it to the other inmates, at these high prices. They could make thousands off of a pound of tobacco. So $500 is totally worth it to them. So we've got our Taylor cigarettes, we've got the rolling tobacco, but sometimes those things aren't readily available, or people don't have the money to pay those exorbitant prices for those things. And but people who want to smoke will always find a way to smoke, and there are other ways that people find things to smoke as well. One of the jobs at this work camp, I mentioned the firefighting. That was like one of the things, that's like the main thing the camp does, but there are also other jobs that people can have. And one of the jobs is the compost. People go outside of the facility and they work in this compost facility, okay? And a lot of the compost guys were pretty popular because they would often find things in the compost that would be brought back to smoke. And this includes cigarette butts that there's some tobacco still left in, or parts of cigarettes, and cigars that have tobacco still left in them. And you can imagine where these things are being found in the compost. You know, it's in a pile of trash. Sometimes it would be like wet from sitting in the trash juice that they found it in, and they would have to dry it out before it could be smoked. Who knows what that shit was sitting in? But people who want to smoke are still going to smoke. And if there was nothing else available, that would suffice. And these compost guys were still selling that stuff at pretty high prices just to smoke this leftover, you know, half-smoked cigarettes, or just the tobacco from the half-smoked cigarettes, or the tobacco from the cigar, regardless of where it came from, regardless of whether it was found just in the trash or in an empty beer bottle, you know, at the bottom, floating around in the backwash. This is what is going on in prison right now. This is what people are resorting to use their tobacco. Let me go ahead and take another puff off of this government regulated vape that's full of pure nicotine. Okay. The other thing that is available is dip, you know, like Grizzly or Copenhagen. This was something that I personally was lucky enough to have access to pretty much whenever I wanted, for free. And that was what I was using most of the time when I was in there. And that also sells for very well. I wasn't selling it, I was just using it for myself. And but very, very coveted getting any kind of dip in there. So anyway, having said all that, what are the consequences if you get caught smoking or caught with nicotine in your system on a random drug test? I think the penalty for getting caught in the act is more severe for some reason than if you're caught with it in your system. And everybody in the camp is subject to random drug tests. The correctional officers can obviously single anybody out if they want to. If they suspect anybody of anything, you know, they can drug test any inmate at any time. But they also do this lottery where everybody in the camp is always getting randomly drug tested. While I was there, I got randomly drug tested one time, and they test for the nicotine. Nicotine showed up on my test because I was using the dip all the time. So as far as nicotine on the random drug test goes, the rule is like a 3 strikes you're out thing. If you have nicotine show up in your drug test 3 times in a row, then you get kicked out of camp and you have to go back to the yard, which is like a higher security prison area. And along with that, you know, it's very likely that these, you know, mess ups will cause your prison sentence to extend. You'll end up having to do more time. I wasn't really worried about that happening while I was there because I knew that I wasn't going to be there for long enough for them to have time to hit me with 2 more random drug tests. So I just wasn't super worried about it. The other thing that I had to do was yard duty, I think it was called, where I had to do 16 hours of some job, like cleaning up the yard or something, in my free time outside of work. that was totally fine with me because it allowed me to get out and do some other things that I wanted to do while I was there, kind of unsupervised. So I invited it. Actually, I kind of wanted to do that because maybe I'll talk about that some other time. So all in all, this nicotine ban policy may seem like something that's reasonable from the outside, like from a bureaucratic standpoint, like we need to reduce smoking in the prison community, and so we're going to ban smoking, right? But on the ground level, it's a disaster. It's completely ridiculous. It's not stopping anyone who wants to smoke from smoking. It's causing a bunch of mayhem and problems for inmates who are doing it anyway, and it's causing inmates to have to resort to smoking like the most foul shit and unsafe products. I mean, you could say that nicotine isn't safe on any level, but it's a hell of a lot less like healthy and hell of a lot less, good for you when you don't even know what you're smoking half the time. Some people, when there was no tobacco available, they would even resort to just smoking like the tea from the tea bags that they bought off of the commissary just to have something to satisfy this oral fixation they had to smoke. So I'm not saying that people should be doing that or people have to do that. Obviously, everybody has a choice. But the reality of the situation is that that is what people are doing anyway, even when you try to stop them from doing this. It also creates this entire black market paradigm that just wouldn't be happening if these bans weren't in effect. It's completely unnecessary. While I was there, I ran into certain inmates who had been inmates before these bans took effect, and I asked them, okay, what was it like then? And they just said, oh yeah, we just would go to the commissary and buy our cigarettes, and we had our designated smoking areas, and that was fine. No problem. Now, everybody, since it's banned, everybody's smoking inside as well. So everybody smokes in the bathroom. Everybody comes in and smokes in the bathroom and basically hotboxes the bathrooms with nicotine smoke. So all the people who don't want to be smoking are also exposed more to the secondhand smoke. It's just a mess on every level. It just causes problems, more problems on every level, and solves nothing at all. When I saw this situation up close and personally, it occurred to me that this is kind of a micro example of what's going on a much larger scale when it comes to the war on drugs generally. People who are just addicted to problematic things their problems are just being added to, and they're causing more problems for the communities around them because they're resorting to being criminals to support their habits. People need help that are addicted to these things. People need real help, but they don't need to be criminalized for just being sick or being addicted. They have a lot of issues. I promise you, anyone who is addicted, like severely addicted to anything, whether it's illegal or not, has lots of issues, right? But what would it really help to make every alcoholic into a criminal that had to find like bootlegged liquor that they didn't know what was in it or what the percentage was or how it was made to get to drink and make them into a criminal for having alcohol or having alcohol in their system and like ban them from being able to engage with the larger community in multiple ways just because of this, just because they like to drink a lot? No, I mean, we don't want anybody to drink too much. We don't want anybody to be addicted to anything. But we also don't need to make their problems bigger in an attempt to make them stop. That's just not how it works at all. We have to come up with better solutions to public health problems than to simply create more problems for the people who are suffering from those public health problems. All right, so what about me and my vaping? I've never been a nicotine guy at all, really. But when I was in there, it was something I had access to, and it was something to do, and I was kind of motivated to do it by the sense that I liked getting away with something that the people who had taken all my freedom away were enforcing. That just felt like the right thing to do to me. It felt good. I liked that feeling of getting away with something. But never really been into nicotine. So when I got out, I was on the dip. I switched to Zins for a while, and then somebody had a vape around me. I started vaping, and I just started doing it, just because I'm being lazy. But whatever. This is not interesting to me anymore. It doesn't do anything for me, and I don't want to do it anymore. So right now, I'm going to take one last puff. And say goodbye to this thing. I'm done. The song of the week is the song that I've been digging the most this week, and that is Ween is the band, Never Squeal is the song. Check it out. I'll see you guys next week, and we'll see how this not vaping goes. I'll let you know. All right? That's it.